The threatening messages targeting the university had been escalating for weeks, but campus security guard Robert Hayes was the first to recognize the genuine threat pattern. Because identifying threat assessment indicators, analyzing behavioral patterns, and predicting targeted violence weren't skills he'd learned from campus security training. They were techniques he'd mastered during 12 years as an FBI behavioral analyst, whose threat assessment work had prevented attacks on schools and government facilities across the country. Robert Hayes had been working security at Riverside University for 6 years, and in that time he'd become more than just a guard. He'd become a trusted part of the academic community. The university served 18,000 students across a sprawling campus that included dormitories, academic buildings, research facilities, and recreational areas where young people from across the country came to build their futures. At 48, Robert carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who understood both the energy of campus life and the complexities of managing large communities of young adults under various pressures. Medium height, graying hair, and the kind of approachable presence that made students feel safe while seeking help, but also made troublemakers think twice about causing problems. He wore his uniform with professional pride and moved through campus with the methodical awareness of someone who understood that university security was about protecting both people and the educational environment. The campus itself was typical of American higher education. Historic buildings mixed with modern facilities, green spaces where students gathered between classes, and the constant activity of young people pursuing knowledge while navigating the social complexities of college life. It was a place of intellectual growth, personal development, and the kind of optimistic energy that came from thousands of people working toward better futures. What made Robert different from typical campus security was his understanding of how behavioral patterns could indicate escalating threats, especially in academic environments where stress, social isolation, and academic pressure could sometimes push vulnerable individuals toward dangerous decisions. While other guards focused on parking violations and noise complaints, Robert found himself automatically assessing threat indicators, monitoring concerning behaviors, and recognizing warning signs that could predict when campus conflicts might escalate to violence. The problem had started 8 weeks ago with anonymous threats posted on social media platforms targeting the university, specific departments, and individual faculty members. The messages had begun as general complaints about academic policies, but had gradually escalated to more specific and concerning language about making people pay and showing everyone the consequences. The threats weren't specific enough to identify a particular individual, but they demonstrated knowledge of campus operations, class schedules, and faculty routines that suggested someone with direct access to university information. More concerning, the language and targeting patterns matched behavioral indicators that Robert recognized as potential precursors to planned violence. Robert began conducting a threat assessment using FBI methodologies. He analyzed the language patterns, tracked timing and escalation, and evaluated the specific information contained about campus operations. The profile was troubling. The threat maker had detailed knowledge of university schedules and security procedures, showed escalating anger with specific grievances, and included language suggesting movement from anger toward operational planning for targeted action. Robert's FBI training had taught him that campus violence rarely occurred without warning signs. The anonymous threat maker was exhibiting classic pre-attack indicators, grievance development, target selection, and operational research. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert implemented behavioral threat assessment while maintaining routine duties. He coordinated with campus IT to track digital footprints, reviewed security footage for unusual surveillance, and analyzed operational security methods. The investigation revealed the threat maker was likely within the university community with legitimate access to facilities and information systems. The level of detail suggested someone systematically gathering intelligence about potential targets. The behavioral pattern indicated Attack planning, systematic preparation preceding targeted violence. The threat maker was studying target routines, identifying security vulnerabilities, and developing operational knowledge for potential attacks. Robert identified that threats focused specifically on psychology department faculty involved in violence research, suggesting someone who felt challenged by academic work on violence prevention. Robert's breakthrough came when he realized that the threat pattern matched indicators that warranted federal attention. The combination of detailed operational planning, specific targeting of individuals, and potential connections to broader anti-academic sentiment suggested someone who posed a genuine risk, not just to the university, but to the academic community's ability to conduct research on sensitive topics. Robert contacted his former supervisor at the FBI, Special Agent Lisa Martinez, who now managed behavioral threat assessment for the Bureau's Domestic Terrorism Unit. The FBI had been tracking threats against academic institutions, particularly those involving research on violence prevention and behavioral analysis. Robert, this targeting pattern is exactly what we've been seeing in threats against academic researchers, Agent Martinez explained during their secure phone conversation. The specific focus on psychology faculty and the operational planning indicators suggest someone who may be connected to broader anti-academic extremism that we've been investigating. The FBI wanted Robert to continue his campus security work while serving as a threat assessment asset for their ongoing investigation. He would monitor the threat maker's activities, document any escalation in planning behavior, and coordinate with federal agents to develop intervention strategies that could prevent violence while protecting the university community. The approach required careful balance between campus autonomy and federal oversight. Universities valued their independence from government intervention, but genuine threats to academic freedom and student safety required resources that only federal law enforcement could provide. Over the next month, Robert conducted a sophisticated threat assessment operation while maintaining his routine security duties. His legitimate access to every area of campus allowed him to observe potential surveillance activities, document concerning behaviors, and identify the methods being used to gather intelligence about targeted faculty members. The intelligence revealed that the threat maker was more sophisticated than campus administrators realized. They were using multiple social media accounts to monitor faculty activities, had developed detailed knowledge of class schedules and office hours, and were tracking the personal routines of specific professors who researched violence prevention. Robert's FBI training allowed him to recognize behavioral patterns that indicated escalation toward action. The threat maker had moved from general complaints to specific targeting, from anonymous messaging to operational surveillance, and from angry rhetoric to what appeared to be logistical planning for potential attacks. Most concerning, the surveillance activities suggested someone who was studying not just the targeted faculty members, but also the response capabilities of campus security and local law enforcement. This kind of counter-surveillance indicated someone who was planning to defeat security measures rather than simply making threats to intimidate. The situation escalated when Robert identified the threat maker during a surveillance operation outside the psychology department building. The individual was a former graduate student who had been dismissed from the university's psychology program 2 years earlier for academic misconduct and concerning behavior toward faculty members. Jeremy Walsh had been conducting systematic surveillance of his former professors, photographing their daily routines, and gathering information about campus security procedures. More concerning, he had been carrying what appeared to be detailed plans and had been observed timing the movements of targeted faculty members with suspicious precision. Robert immediately activated the threat response protocol he had developed with federal agents. Walsh was not confronted directly, which could have escalated his planning toward immediate action, but his activities were documented and reported to the FBI Threat Assessment Team. Campus security was quietly enhanced around targeted buildings, and key faculty members were briefed on personal safety measures without revealing the full scope of the threat. The surveillance revealed that Walsh had detailed plans for accessing faculty offices, maps of building layouts, and information about the daily routines of professors who had been involved in his academic dismissal. Mental health records obtained through federal warrant revealed a history of escalating anger and violent fantasies that had progressed to the point where targeted violence seemed increasingly likely. The FBI coordinated a multi-agency response that included campus police, local law enforcement, mental health professionals, and university administration. The goal was to interrupt Walsh's planning process through intervention that addressed his grievances while ensuring campus safety and preserving the university's educational mission. Robert's role during the intervention was to provide real-time intelligence on campus operations and potential target locations while maintaining his cover until federal agents were ready for direct action. His understanding of both campus vulnerabilities and Walsh's behavioral patterns was essential for ensuring the intervention succeeded without endangering students or faculty. The intervention began with a coordinated approach that included mental health evaluation, legal assessment of threat potential, and campus security measures designed to interrupt Walsh's surveillance and planning activities. Robert coordinated with federal agents to ensure they had complete situational awareness of campus operations during the intervention. The results revealed the scope of Walsh's planning. He had developed detailed attack scenarios targeting specific faculty members, had researched the response capabilities of campus security, and had acquired materials that could be used to carry out violent attacks. Mental health evaluation revealed severe depression combined with paranoid ideation about academic persecution. The aftermath of the federal intervention revealed Robert's role to his shocked colleagues and university administration. The reliable campus security guard who had handled everything from student emergencies to faculty assistance was actually a former FBI special agent whose behavioral threat assessment expertise had prevented what could have been a devastating campus attack. University President Dr. Sarah Chen was the first to understand the scope of what had happened. "Robert, you've been conducting a federal threat assessment for months while handling routine campus security duties," she said during the post-incident briefing. "You prevented a potential tragedy that could have destroyed lives and devastated our academic community." Campus Police Chief Mike Rodriguez struggled to process how the security guard he'd worked with for 6 years had managed such a complex threat intervention. "Robert, you identified and stopped a planned attack that our entire department missed. How did you recognize what the rest of us couldn't see?" "That's exactly why it worked," Robert explained to the assembled group of administrators, faculty, and security personnel. "If I had approached this as a former federal agent, it would have created administrative complications and might have driven Walsh underground where we couldn't monitor his activities. But as a campus security guard with good observational skills, I could conduct threat assessment and coordinate with federal resources without triggering the defensive reactions that complicate university operations." Agent Martinez arrived at the campus to personally thank Robert for his work and to address concerns about future campus safety. Special Agent Hayes's behavioral threat assessment was textbook prevention, she announced. His understanding of campus violence indicators and his position within the university community allowed us to prevent a targeted attack that could have resulted in multiple casualties. Following the intervention, the university implemented comprehensive threat assessment protocols based on Robert's recommendations and FBI best practices. The changes included mental health resources, academic support systems, and early intervention programs to address student distress before escalation. Robert worked with administration and faculty to develop threat recognition training emphasizing behavioral warning signs, campus-appropriate intervention techniques, and mental health coordination. The FBI offered Robert federal positions, but he had discovered something important during his 6 years at the university. He genuinely valued the educational mission and daily interactions of campus security work. "I spent 12 years with the FBI analyzing threats against schools and government facilities," Robert explained to Agent Martinez when she offered him a return to federal service. "But I've spent 6 years here protecting students and faculty who are working to build better futures through education. Both kinds of protection matter, but this feels more like community service than law enforcement." Robert decided to stay with the university, but with an expanded role that recognized his expertise. The administration hired him as Director of Campus Safety and Threat Assessment, responsible for developing behavioral threat assessment protocols for the entire university system. The FBI maintained Robert as a consultant, available for cases where his specific expertise in campus violence prevention could make a difference. But his primary focus remained on the kind of educational community protection that prevented violence rather than just responding to it after people had been hurt. Local law enforcement and other universities worked with Robert to develop campus threat assessment programs that could identify and prevent targeted violence while preserving the open academic environment essential for higher education. His protocols became models for campus security throughout the region. 2 years later, Robert had transformed campus security operations at universities across the state. His protocols for behavioral threat assessment, student support, and federal coordination had prevented numerous potential campus violence incidents while maintaining the kind of open academic environment that allowed intellectual growth and free inquiry to flourish. More importantly, Robert had demonstrated that effective campus security required understanding human behavior well enough to prevent violence, not just responding after threats had already escalated to dangerous levels. His approach combined federal threat assessment expertise with genuine understanding of academic environments and the unique pressures that could drive people toward desperate actions. The university itself had become a model for campus violence prevention in higher education. Educational security experts pointed to it as an example of successful threat management that protected both student safety and academic freedom. Federal agencies used it for training exercises on campus-based threat assessment. Detective Maria Santos, who had worked with Robert throughout the federal intervention, often brought new officers to the campus for training. "This is what professional campus security looks like," she would tell them. "Not just managing parking and noise complaints, but understanding human behavior well enough to prevent violence before it destroys academic communities." Robert Hayes continues his security work at Riverside University, but everyone in the academic community now understands that their Director of Campus Safety brings something unique to his role. He's the former FBI special agent who chose educational security over federal career advancement, who understands that protecting students and faculty is just as important as investigating threats against government facilities. His story reminds us that expertise developed in federal service doesn't end when someone leaves government employment. It continues in new forms of community protection that may be less dramatic, but are equally valuable to the people whose daily lives are made safer by that expertise. Sometimes the person ensuring safety at an American university carries training from the FBI's most elite behavioral analysis units, quietly preventing campus violence with skills developed protecting schools and government facilities nationwide. These are the professionals who understand that true security comes not from responding to violence after it happens, but from recognizing and interrupting the behavioral patterns that lead to targeted attacks. Robert's choice to remain in campus security work rather than return to federal service represents something important about protection: that keeping people safe doesn't require federal authority or national assignments. Sometimes the most valuable service happens quietly, in educational communities, provided by professionals whose expertise ensures that learning can continue without fear. The next time you visit a university campus and notice the security professional who seems particularly observant and skilled at reading people, remember Robert's story. That person might just be someone whose background in federal threat assessment continues to serve and protect, one academic community at a time.